Hi again.
Hello, hello.
Good morning.
Good evening. How's your day?
I guess it's good evening. It was good. I just normal day all throughout the day.
Um,
Wednesday is yeah. Oh, yeah. Cheers with a coffee.
do you sleep during the day? Like, what's your routine when you said that last time you said that you were on EST time zone? What does that actually mean when you're not on EST time zone?
Uh, well, I basically wake up at around 3 a.m. your time, and I sleep at around 6 a.m. your time.
Wait, that would imply that you're up for more than 24 hours?
Um,
Wait, you wake up at 3 a.m. my time, which is about 3
no,
p.
sorry. Uh, 3 p.m. your time.
You wake up at
I
about 3 p.m. my time.
Wait, I'm sorry.
That doesn't make
Okay.
sense either.
I sleep at 7 a.m. here, so that's 6 a.m. your time.
Mm-hmm.
And wake up at like around 3 p.m. here, which is
About 3 a.m.
3 a.m. your
3 a.m. I
time.
just do the 12 hours. I know sometimes it's 13 hours, but I feel like it's
Yeah,
easier.
now it's 13.
Yeah, it's 13, but for
Yeah.
bedtime, I can say that we can be an hour off.
Yeah. So yeah,
um,
basically it's like close to your time zone.
yeah. Okay, so you're going to sleep at about. Oh, so you really do. Is that hard in the Philippines? Someone else I've worked with in the Philippines said that a lot of people kind of are on that schedule a little bit, so it's not that difficult.
Personally, for me, because when I was still a student, I followed that time zone. I mean, I still sleep late.
Yeah.
So when I transitioned into a work from home job that's also US based, it was quite easy for me. So not a lot of transition on my side, but I know a lot of people are do sleep late also.
Um, got it. I understand. All right. Well, let's dive in. I know that you've had a little bit of time to digest our last meeting. Let me just kind of set the agenda, and then we can kind of have a conversation. I view this as still like a training session. So, ideally, I'm recording it. I'll give it access to you later so you could kind of review it again. I'm hoping that we could kind of go through your questions, have any other questions that pop up. I can show you some stuff. Um, where we left last time is, remember, there's really three things that you have to kind of master to do well at this. The first is understanding LinkedIn, the actual like features of the system and how um, to navigate that, which I understand that that just takes a little bit of familiarity, but because I know that any young person has used LinkedIn before, that this isn't rocket science, that part of it. But there are little things that I'm assuming you probably don't really think about too much about, like how to use it to create engagement, right? Because I understand most people don't do that. That's the bridge that we need to overcome because I'm really looking to use the functionality to create engagement, to create results. It's almost like I'm gamifying it, you could say, for
Yeah.
myself. Right. So most people don't think of LinkedIn that way. It's more of like just a profile. Um, they're not thinking of the game of LinkedIn. So that's one. I really want to focus time on that. And then two, in order to do well at the game, you have to understand the messaging and positioning associated with specifically Michael and Gary. That requires understanding their business, understanding their target market, understanding what their desires are. Um, I'm hoping that we could kind of have a great conversation about that as well. I know that you even asked me for a list. We could talk through that. The reality of that is some not the business doesn't change, but the desires on a, let's say, day-to-day basis might, or not monthly basis, quarterly basis, might change a little bit depending on what type of results we're trying to get in the game, if that makes sense. Because we can control what we're doing. That, for example, maybe, 1 month we might really want to focus on trying to create meetings for Gary with some HR business leaders. And then another month we might say, hey, let's really try to go and get Gary on a podcast. And then that might change some of the prospecting, right? Who we're going after to try to win at that game. So it's a little fluid is kind of my point. It's not like static where it's like always this, but there are parts that are always like under. If you think of prospecting as an umbrella, there's different spokes. All of them are important, but we might want to focus on some over the others. So we could kind of talk about that. That's ultimately what I want to get out of today. We could start, hopefully, through that conversation, start talking about the third pillar of LinkedIn, which is like specifically taking actions. Some of your questions started maybe speaking a little bit to that, like what other actions or best practices are available. And that's when things kind of morph together because there's a lot of, once you understand LinkedIn and the messaging and positioning, then we really need to kind of start talking about like, okay, well, like, what do you do? Like, how do you spend the time? What is the best bang for your buck in terms of the time spent? And yeah, we could talk about that. To be honest, that's a lot of like trial and error and just kind of doing it. There's not like, I can give you a lot of best practices and we can talk about that, but I would say that you almost get like a feel for it, if that makes sense, because you can. That's what I love about LinkedIn as a service is that you can get to a place where you feel confident in knowing LinkedIn, the messaging and positioning, and what actions realistically would probably get results that you have confidence that you could get into an account from somebody who's not even thinking about this and just impress them by your skills. And then there's levels to the game in terms of like copywriting, you know, how much time you're willing to spend on it. Like that's where the business side comes in. But I don't want to overwhelm you. So I kind of want to hear from you where you're at in your process. And then we can kind of, let's just have an open conversation. And then I can share my screen and, direct you in any way.
Okay. So I actually did like, I felt like one thing that I love about this is I feel like it's not just about LinkedIn and doing like an easy task of commenting, but of course it needs you to understand the business in a deeper level, the personas. So I feel like it's going to be like a mix of marketing, writing, business development. So that's what I really enjoy at first. So let me first discuss how I did handle my time for the past days.
Okay.
I started like Saturday. I spent just an hour, and most of these are because when you send the accounts, it's most for familiarity, the first look, the first impression, and then I started to do one specific time for Gary and specific time for Michael, and I did have my first impression, EPS, and so let me just first discuss this. My first impression would be uh, the accounts are very straightforward. Although it's straightforward in a way that it directs you to the business and not to the persona of each people. And in a way, that's something that I may suggest that we add more is more details about the person than going directly in the business. Because when I visit the account, it's it really like introduced me immediately to the business than the person. That's how I felt on both of them. Although I feel less of it. I don't know why I feel less of it on Gary's side than on Michael's side. I do understand the part that when you said Power Plus is more direct than instinctive. to be honest, like it took me a while to understand more about the instinctive business model or business informations. That it's more like you would need to take more time to understand it than Power Plus. Power Plus is more direct. In terms of persona, I bet that both of them are really more in the family, very family oriented. I think both of them mentioned it in their, what do you call that, podcast. I did. What I've noticed is, I'm not sure about it, but Gary has less podcast videos than Michael. So yeah, I feel like I've get to know more Power Plus than
Yep.
instinctive in terms of like the business side. So let me just quickly go to my notes again.
Sure. Um,
Mm.
just to piggyback off of that, context is always really important. So, one, I love suggestions on how to make first impressions better. So, thank you for sharing that. And yes, we can make those changes. I would say the reason it's like that was because I set up Michael's first and I've never really changed it years ago. Right? So, when Michael was my first client, Michael's how this whole thing started because he was the perfect match for me because when I met him through LinkedIn, he's a dentist. So what he's busy. He doesn't really want to do he has like a real profession. He just sold a product and wants to get it out there. So it's the right fit for like letting me kind of run with this. Because he's more strapped for time. Like he doesn't like I used to get him up on like calls with people, but it wasn't really worth his time because he doesn't have a lot of time. He
Yeah.
will get on a call with somebody, but it kind of transitioned into like he would love to do podcasts, which is why we proactively for him try to get him on podcast. For Michael, I would say we want to continue to do that. That's why even though when you say the target markets for Michael, I mean, yes, athletes can use this, athletic directors can use this, trainers can use this. Anybody that is related to sports is technically a good prospect, but because Michael, his reality is he wants to get on a podcast, we have been very focused on specifically trying to nurture relationships with people who have sports related podcasts because that's kind of how he's judging us. And it also helps, like you saw, us to build like that media page. Like it makes it where Michael likes the service better. So that's why you're seeing that. Now, on the flip side, with Gary, Gary is a businessman. He's an entrepreneur who's sitting at his desk. So he's willing to meet with anybody. He likes meetings. He likes being out and about, unlike Michael, who's a little bit more introverted and like doesn't really want to get on a call with anybody who really wants to meet with him. So it's important to understand that distinction because you can kind of see from LinkedIn as a service, the way I feel like I do a good job is I try to meet people where they're at. I'm trying to deliver on the results that they're trying to seek. So that's why we've been on Gary has been on less podcasts. With that being said, I want to grow Gary's business more, and I feel like him meeting with all these random people is not going anywhere because like they meet and then it doesn't translate to anything. So which is why I'm trying to write more to amplify him from a brand standpoint. I do want to see if we could get him on more podcasts, but that's the reason why. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I want you to take away from this that the results that you're seeing are intentional based off of what we are aiming to achieve. So it's important to see how we could come across better, like what you pointed out, maybe changing things on the profile. These are all iterative processes. Nothing is static. It always changes, which is another reason why LinkedIn as a service is so good, because if we make suggestions and then just make the changes and then present those back to the client, then we look like we are doing work, if that makes sense, right? We are analyzing how we're coming across, creating an hypothesis on like what we think could be better. At that point, maybe asking the client if he approves it, if he agrees with us. Typically, they're like, yeah, okay, go for it, right? Because we're all on the same team of trying to get better results. So with that being said, like, we can take another stab at updating the profile, changing certain things, adding certain paragraphs, removing things to try to humanize them more. That in essence is like why we exist, because they're not going to do that on their own. And also they value, and I value, your opinion, because sometimes you get so close to it that you are coming with a fresh pair of eyes that allow you to, if it's not clear for you, it probably isn't clear for somebody else. So the answer is we should think about how we can make it better. And then that in and of itself is good work, right? So like, yeah, those are the takeaways, are that the outcomes you see are very intentional based off of what we've tried to achieve, tried to go after. But in this new pursuit, I'm actually hoping that we can do more by better positioning. Like if we have good positioning, better, like if you're helping me objectively set up the profile a little bit better, I'm writing content that hopefully gets a little bit more engagement, and then you have a better understanding with me of what we're trying to achieve. It allows you to do better prospecting in real time, because you will be able to see somebody and say, oh, this is a good person for what we were talking about. Let's at least save him so we remember. And then let's see if we could open a conversation, because this stuff takes time. That's when you get into sales. Like we talked about funnels. Like the expectation is not because we find somebody that we think would be a good prospect for the client, that means that person wants to talk. That's where our job comes in, to say, okay, well, what can we do? How could we position Michael or Gary in a positive light? That first, are they connected with them? If they're not connected with them, do they post? Can we go and look at other things that they've posted, maybe engaged with that a little bit, added a thoughtful comment, liked it? If they're already connected, have Michael and Gary exchanged any messages at all? Like understanding that context and then plotting out what's the best way to kind of open up conversations is the skill set, basically. Because it does take a lot of time and energy to think through that. But what I always like to say is, the LinkedIn allows you to do sales. So you'll see that each Michael and Gary have close to 10,000 people in their network. But me and you are not trying to engage with all 10,000 at all. We could build that up. We want to influence those numbers, but we're looking for who are the 50 people that we want to kind of try to see if we can nudge toward a serious conversation. And that is what ultimately I view as success. If we have a lot of open conversations with ideal people that are somewhat serious, and I say serious meaning we're transitioning away from the positive sentiments of how to open a conversation and starting toward pitching. That's important for you to understand and clarify when I say serious. We talked last time that oftentimes people just immediately pitch what they want. This is what I want, and then you're like, please get away from it. This is too much. But if we can try to open conversations, tell us about you, what are you working on, great comment. If we're always expressing positivity towards people, then human nature is we will get positivity back from some people, not everybody. And then from that, we could then pitch for a meeting, a call to action. We can pitch something. And that's where it starts getting serious, because then we could follow up with people that we've already pitched. It becomes less, if you've already exchanged some words, some positivity, and then you pitch and someone doesn't respond to you, now all of a sudden it's a little bit easier to follow up with that person because you're not annoying them. You've already had a conversation. They're just not responding. And now you're doing a favor by asking them to, hey, I know you're busy. I just want to ping this to the top. And you do have to follow up in sales, and we're okay with that. That's part of the job, is just staying organized with the opportunities, following up with them. So, for example, a good use case would be if we open up positive conversations, we pitch something, they don't respond, but then that person's somewhat active on LinkedIn, and we notice that over the next week they post something. We could comment on that person. We want to make sure that Michael and Gary are top of mind, and that's going towards the actions. But like by doing these positive engagements and such in different ways, we can make sure that people are seeing Michael and Gary, and ultimately that's what we want to do. If we do that successfully, then we'll create a lot of inbound, like I showed you examples of those, and that's what we want. It makes our job a lot easier. If Michael or Gary are getting hit on LinkedIn by people who are saying, hey, I've seen you, I would like to talk to you. That, to me, is the biggest win we could get, right? It makes it great because they're not doing anything. It's clearly us, but they get those messages that make it like, oh, I'm happy Colin is doing something.
So are they actively still on LinkedIn? So when you said they don't have that much of time to go into LinkedIn itself,
Yeah.
do they actually not view this comment, or just when you tap them to reply that they go active?
I honestly don't even know the answer to that because I don't talk to them. Anyway, what I would say is I like to assume that they see everything, but that they're not responding to everything. So therefore, I can try my best with you to just stay on top of everything so we're not missing opportunities. And then, organizing things. So if we do need their feedback, then it's more targeted of service. Hey, look at this. Hey, look at this. I do see, though, that and you will notice over time, they do respond. So to people. So what I have noticed is I don't think either of them so much, or Gary a little bit more than Michael, go like on their desktop and like spend a lot of time on it. They're getting it on their phone and then are looking at what the conversations are happening. I don't know if they see a comment or if they're watching, for example, like one tactic, I know this is like an action, but I want to sprinkle those in so you could kind of start seeing tactical strategies. Like LinkedIn allows you to endorse people. You can endorse them for a skill, right? So that's something that we have. Yeah, so that's a positive sentiment that if you see somebody posting and they're talking about stuff, right? For Gary, let's say like you see somebody that's like an HR thought leader, and then Gary can endorse them for HR because like they're posting, that's helpful, right? Like if they are demonstrating themselves as a thought leader and then we interact with them and then a few days later we go and endorse them on their profile for what they're talking about, that means that person is going to get a notification on their end that Gary endorsed them for this skill. So we created a positive interaction that made Gary look better, that the next time we maybe reply, that person might be more willing to respond back. Or maybe that person decides, hey, I'll endorse Gary. And then if they endorse Gary and we know that, then it makes it a little bit easier to say, oh, let's thank them in the DM and let's open up the conversation. My point is, I don't know, to be honest, if Gary and Michael are looking that closely to know that that's how it happened. But what I will say and what I'm hoping happens here is that like when I said, like, remember last time I want to build it up so they get so many like notifications, like they'll notice that. Meaning, like, if we do that and that we're getting endorsements and like likes and comments and DMs and like all of this is happening, they will notice that we're working. And that's, to be honest, all I've ever really cared. And I've been doing this year, so they know that I'm working. I'm just judging myself to a higher standard at this point than I think they're even judging me. Because, one, for content. Two, because I want to grow you into feeling confident in how to drive results for somebody like Michael and Gary, because you're a young person looking for employment, and then these people are have established businesses just looking to promote themselves and promote their business. And so it's like a really nice exchange of like they're willing to pay for service, but then the question becomes how good are we? Like how good are we at our skill? Because that's the thing about any service business. Like it's competitive and like you just got to be good at it. So how good are we at getting the results?
Oh, okay.
Make
It,
sense?
it makes it makes yeah, it makes a lot of sense actually. And it's very helpful that you actually specify them into points, like the one that you sent recently in Slack. And I see it more as a guide. Would you like me to expound more on my notes here on my end?
Uh sure. I have your notes up. Um let
Oh, actually, I have a bigger
Oh, you have
one
more
at this.
notes? Okay. You want to share your screen? Do you want to go through what do you I feel like I might need to show you some things so we can go over your questions. You can hit me with questions. I can maybe walk through LinkedIn. You tell me what you think would be most helpful.
Um, let me just ask. Let me just ask now the questions that we've just tackled, or I think would be relevant in this time. Is because you've mentioned that it's not static.
Yeah.
Some parts of the accounts are fixed, and some parts or some actions or what's happening are intentional. But what part of the accounts? What do you consider are fixed part of the account, and what are the things that you would say we can improve more on? I mean, I could say my suggestions on which part we can improve more, but also I want to know your end on your end, like which are you willing to change, and which do you think are more fixed?
Yeah.
So another.
Um it's an interesting thing when you do this for a while. I feel like this is like I don't know if you're a numbers person, but you know how like some people when they're doing like do you have any are you a numbers person? Do you like numbers? Do you like math?
No,
Yeah, neither do I.
I'm more on words
Me too.
and
Me too. Uh, so yeah, I don't like numbers. I'm more of a verbal person, but I've heard from people, let's just say, that do analysis that the numbers just speak to them, where they could
mm,
see like a financial statement, let's just say, and then into it a lot of understanding of the business from the numbers. That is an example of something that is static, where you have the same type of numbers, but it's fluid in terms of what the numbers represent. Tell
yeah,
people like fluidly like maybe what they need to do, what they need to focus on. I would say that LinkedIn is somewhat similar in the sense that it's static in terms of you have constraints. There's only so many things you can do, right? Because LinkedIn it's constrained. Over time, they do kind of launch some new features that we could implement into our strategy, but there's still constraints. So the fluid part is what speaks to you. I know that that sounds weird a little bit, but it's like you're almost need to understand the business results and then also like what's available to you at any given time. Because like I said, when you do
mhm,
this somewhat consistently, the idea is that you want to create engagement, but like you can't force it. You got to meet people where they're at. So at one time you might need to get set up, you might need to follow more hashtags, you might need to think through what are other how do I find people by using Sales Navigator. Once you spend a lot of time there, the next week you might say, okay, well I don't really need to do that again. Now I need to focus on commenting more to create more engagement. Once you start doing that, you might say, hey, I'm getting a lot of profile views. I can see that on LinkedIn. People are looking at me. Let me go look at who the people are that are looking at me and then seeing if I should connect with them, reach out to them, right? So it's like every week is kind of building on top of one another that it becomes fluid, but you have somewhat direction because it's building on top of one another. Are you at least kind of following how that could be possible?
yeah.
right?
Yes.
So I don't. It's hard to say you have to do this, you have to do this. You have to try things and then see how that responded, and then you kind of start having more confidence to do more of one thing or move on to something else. And you might go back to another thing. You might say, "Hey, I'm just not really having a lot of conversations," or "I really want to get Gary on a podcast. So let me go to Sales Navigator and let's see if he's already connected to any people who are in that industry that like do media or podcasts." So that requires like Sales Navigator. You might need to find who those people are, and then you might not be able to do that so quickly. You got to see how active are those people. How could I start a conversation with them? Can I do a reach out? I want it to be a little organic. You saw that I got inbound from people yesterday that say that they have podcasts. See, this is the thing that's interesting about LinkedIn is you never know how other people run their business. So my guess is that those people are not necessarily the podcast. They're the ones that have a business that represent podcasts, and then they're going and seeing who's interested so they could do the vetting to help that person. So that's an example of like, well, I don't even know if you want to get Gary on a podcast, how do you go about doing it? Are you looking for the podcast directly, or do you need these manager in-betweens, right? You don't know that stuff. As you do it, though, and you get more familiar, you start learning, like Gary would, basically, of how that industry works a little bit more, that you have more confidence on who to nurture relationships with. So, for example, that's where also like my software comes in, because I'm literally the whole reason I built that was to try to help me stay organized on LinkedIn, because this starts becoming like a data management challenge, right? Like how do you create lists of who to follow up with based on notes for yourself, because it's like it got too much. That's why I developed the software, because it's like now me and you can stay organized together, even with Gary, and help process who are good opportunities. I know that that's not really answering your question, but the situations kind of speak to you, like numbers kind of do. One thing I would say is, you asked me this. Here is the what, like a tip and trick. You want to try to find people who are active on LinkedIn, because you could go on. You could find the most perfect person who represents them as this is exactly who I want to meet with. But if they don't ever check LinkedIn, you're just going to be sitting there for a long time, because they might not literally. Sorry?
I'm sorry. How do you actually, what are the signs that you see that they are active on LinkedIn? Aside from posting or
Do they
their
post?
comments?
Do they post? What is there? You could go on a profile and see who, if you go to any profile on LinkedIn, you can go to their activity. So you could see their post activity. So you see, for example, I posted,
45 minutes.
Well, I think this is just static because I haven't like refreshed. But yes, you're seeing that I posted in the last, let's say, 30 days. That's a good sign. For Michael and Gary, same thing. That means that whoever's there is clearly on LinkedIn.
Active.
Yeah, they're active.
So these activities.
That's one. Another good sign is you can just look at profiles. Do people have banner images? Do people, like, how do they spell out? Like, how are they presenting themselves? That's the other thing. So, are they presenting themselves as an individual? Like, now that you're learning a little bit more on LinkedIn, you can see that there's a difference between certain people just view it as a static resume platform, and some people are using it as a community audience builder.
Yes.
I'm not. A lot of people are using it as a community-based builder. Some people might not be doing it for other people, but they're doing it for themselves. They want to build an audience. It's so much easier to try to network with those people than the people who are just clearly using it as like a resume. They're not very active. They're, consuming information, but they're not really trying to interact with people. If you find people who are community centric, they're trying to build audience, they are commenting on posting, then it's kind of like a cheat code, because anybody that has that mindset knows that the only way to network with people is to engage with people. And so if they understand that, then they should be willing to engage with someone who one is always expressing positive sentiments, right? That's my main thing, that tip and trick. I'm never negative. You can be negative. I choose not to be, especially when I'm doing this for other people, right? I don't try to be sarcastic. I'm very sarcastic for me, but like I would never choose to do that or represent that as Michael or Gary. I just don't really see the value in that. It's always spreading positivity, spreading support, wanting to listen, right? Those are the types of things that kind of make this into a little bit of a cheat code, because everybody wants to be seen and heard and listened to. So if you approach people as with genuine curiosity, and those people are trying to build up a network, then you have higher response rates. Another cheat code is you just got to see how many followers that they have. I mean, I have over 5,000. Michael and Gary have over like close to 10,000. So, if you're finding people with 300, 400, like I'm not saying that they're bad. They're just clearly using it as like an individual tool versus like a community tool. You can't fake these numbers. So it means that anybody who has thousands, I mean, I even think you have 2,500 or so. That was something that, didn't you have? I don't remember. I could be wrong about that. What did you have?
I don't think LinkedIn.
Oh, you had 68. So you were on the other end. So you're an example of somebody that when I saw your
And,
profile,
and
I would say
yeah.
they probably wouldn't respond to me,
Mhm.
and they might
That's-
think I'm a creep, because I'm trying to get in the head of what you would be judging me as, because I'm all about conversion rates, right? And best bang for my buck. So I wouldn't reach out to you, even if you were a target market for Gary. You could tell based off of the fact that you even say marketing director, right? I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying that you're clearly not welcoming people in with that statement. You're presenting your individual self. So that means that you're using LinkedIn as a very individual,
Have a resume or something.
resume focused individual thing. You might go on LinkedIn and consume, but you're not trying to build community. Compare that to other people who have 1,500, 2,000, 5,000. Now as the numbers get up, it might be harder to cut through the noise, because they might get a lot of requests. But like, at least that's where it's like, you got to find your sweet spot. It kind of depends on what you say, right? Because they probably see it. Anyone who has thousands probably will see it. They just might not respond to you. So like, for example, if I go to like my network, these are all people who are inviting me to subscribe or their page. This is another tactic. Again, we're starting to get into the actions, but I feel like this is important, right? There's different ways that we could build rapport. You asked me, aside from great prospecting, commenting, and community, are there any best practices? So we talked about endorsements and congratulatory experiences. Those are cheat codes. Sometimes LinkedIn.
When they have like a milestone or something,
Yeah.
you always engage.
I do prospecting. I'm not saying I always engage. First of all, like, you got to be careful in the sense that, like, I mean, you can, but I've just done this enough times to say that, like, look, like, sometimes, if somebody has a birthday and a middle-aged man reaches out to, like, a pretty girl on her birthday that says happy birthday and they don't really know one another, is that worth it? I found no. It's just not, because it's not going to turn into serious. You're not talking about business. It's a little creepy. And then that person doesn't know that you exist. So we're not helping Gary by that point. So one, it's a matter of prospecting. Now, if someone has a work anniversary and they seem to work at a company that could potentially help with Gary, that has worked. So it goes back to prospecting, understanding like what opportunities are available. Let's see. And now another thing that, so look, celebrations, right? So LinkedIn tells you job changes, birthdays, work anniversaries. So you could see it all in one place and do prospecting, right? So this is why prospecting takes so long, because yes, you can use Sales Navigator, but you also could just every day, there's going to be more people depending on how big the network is. Some people are commenting and reacting to certain things, right? So these are opportunities. I'm not saying these are the best opportunities I found, but like there are ways that we could open up conversations by being congratulatory to the right person.
I want to know, like, just an example. Okay, so for example, you're going to reach out to any of this person. Do you just say congratulations, or you open up another, like it's an open-ended message aside from the congratulations?
Again, there's not right or wrong way, but the thing that I want to show you is you see that if you look at any post, this is any post, congratulations post, what you see is you are creating an opportunity for other people, at the
To
very
see.
least, the person who's responding, who created the message, to see who you are, right?
Okay.
So that's the name of the game here, because you see that every single time you have a name, you have a title, and you have an image. Now, you have the ability to get Michael or Gary's name out there. So the way that I think about this is if I post once a day, let's say we post twice a day, LinkedIn's algorithm, we would hope, would insert that post in the newsfeed. But that's algorithmic, so we can't guarantee, but we can hope that as we do better content and we're doing this more regularly, that we get seen by more people. But
Mhm.
we control how many times that we want other people to see Gary's name popping up in the newsfeed as well. So for example, you'll see that if I start going here and I do this, these are all more opportunities for us to show up
Mhm.
on comments. We could engage in comments. If we did that 10 times a day, let's say, while we posted, you start, and it's all within like the network, you could start seeing how people might notice Gary and Michael in more ways than just the post. They also notice that they're friendly, interactive community builders interacting with other people on the platform. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, what I would say is endorsements and congratulatory experiences are two examples where you could spark engagement. Another one is profile views. LinkedIn does show you who viewed your profile. So, one thing, well, let's just go through these and I'll show you kind of some analytics and stuff. Profile views, company page followers, social content. Repeated that one. These are other best practices. So, for example, we could, if we go to Instinctive, and you're on Gary's account at least, I think I have it because I'm like a manager, but you can invite connections to the company page. So one, we
Mhm.
have the ability to prospect for 620. Are we connected to all those people? Are those people that we should open up conversations with? Could we invite more people to it? What do we say in those messages? These are other examples of ways that we could try to influence the analytics, right? So how many last 30-day activity, we got one new follower. And this is what I'm saying is because I don't take this action. That's why. Is because I'm not spending, this is why I respect the fact that this is like a job, because to do this well, to feed the LinkedIn algorithm, you have to be able to do the inputs to get the outputs to influence the algorithm. If we're consistently finding good people and getting them to be followers, if we post something on the company page, there's a higher probability that LinkedIn will show it to more people. But if it's dormant, if it's not really, if we don't post a lot, why would LinkedIn, if we post once, start showing it to a lot of people? You understand?
Yes.
Okay. So I would say social content. I'm posting, but that doesn't mean that we can't find an article offline and post that as well. Share it with the network. We might want to reshare something else that somebody said that we thought was helpful with a comment, right? These are all, I'm not saying that you have to do this. I understand that you might need copy, but my point is, as you start doing this, if you're showing up every day and then engaging with what you have, like what other people are doing, that's when, to go back to my beginning point, the numbers start speaking to you. Like you just know how to process what's happening and then act accordingly in ways that you can start influencing the numbers. Make sense?
Yes.
So let me go over what I would like. I want to anchor you in some metrics now that we're kind of really focusing on LinkedIn. The beauty of this is we're not reinventing the wheel here, right? Like LinkedIn has chosen, because we got to meet LinkedIn where it's at. So on any page, LinkedIn gives you the analytics for that page. This is where I would focus on trying to influence these numbers, right? Like how do we get better numbers for Michael and Gary? Let's actually like look at their numbers and not my numbers, because I don't even really do anything on my account. I'm just starting to. Again, when I told you my aspiration is to be able to just be Colin, that's what I mean. It's like I don't take action on my account because I have to do it on these accounts. It's my responsibility. So if you could help me influence the numbers, it frees me up to just network as Colin, which is really what I'm after. I believe I could become a LinkedIn influencer, which is what I'm after. But before I do that, I need to make these people LinkedIn influencers, because that was my original promise. Okay. So if you go to, this is what I want to influence. These numbers aren't bad compared to mine, right? 697 profile views, 2,000 post impressions. You got to understand that LinkedIn is using these numbers to be able to determine how likely your stuff is going to be seen. So, like, understandably, right? They're not, if you like don't get any post impressions, you're probably not going to like post something and then all of a sudden get like 1 million views. It's possible if you post maybe a video that's just like so interesting that, you know, it's possible, but like unlikely. So, how do we get more post impressions? How do we get more profile views? This is what I believe you can influence the most, because profile views is really related to like how many comments, engagements, because what are people going to do immediately when we do that engagement? Who is this person? Let's go look at the profile. Even if they don't respond, we get a profile view. And that means something to LinkedIn. Are people looking at who these people are? Because if people are looking at who this person is, there's more likelihood that they'll show the post to more impressions. Like, it all builds on one another. So this is another example of, I showed, like, you get to see all the profile views. So this is a good example of another way that we could do outreach. Hey, Alyssa, I saw that you checked out my profile. What are you working on? You know what I mean? Like, that's a easy opener because you took the action. So it's like a game, right? If Gary's just being friendly, knowing that you already looked at him, you might not have connected with him, but I know that. So this is like another game that now it requires good prospecting, right? Like if I did that to you, you would probably not respond or something, or you'd reach out to me. You know what I mean? Like, so obviously you're not trying to use this to abuse your power by reaching out to like, I don't know, IT technical recruiter. Like, I don't think that is really relevant. But like if you start going down and like
Well,
test,
this is for. Oh, sorry.
yeah.
She's That's an IT technical recruiter. You wouldn't say that someone would be interested in for Gary's business.
No, because I would say a technical recruiter, based off the way that they're holding themselves out, is trying to recruit technical talent. I mean, I haven't looked at her profile, but like Gary's not looking for, he's looking for business. He's not looking for technical help. I mean, that's an example. He could come to me and say, hey, can you help me find technical talent? But that's not how he's using his LinkedIn profile. He's trying to connect with businesses that he could sell his software to.
So most likely for Gary, we're looking for people in the upper level.
Yes, I would say that. I would say HR business leaders, CFOs, like chief financial officers, people who are decision makers within the company.
Okay.
Now, the one thing so yes, absolutely right. One extra thing to think about is because my goal is to create a lot of engagement so I could pass out software, I'm lessening the need for it to be like the the head honcho. That's part of the reason why I designed this software is because Gary is looking for a needle in a haystack. I don't know how much you understand about the bit. This might be a good opportunity for us to just talk about Gary's business because I understand that one's a little bit more complicated. Do you get it? Do you need me to explain it a little bit? What's your understanding of like what Gary does? What does Instinctive do? How would you answer that?
Instinctive is probably for the what I think that's stuck in my mind is an HR system. So basically, they help with people in terms of like document and the use of technology to make it less
Yeah.
tedious. Automate. Another thing is what he mentioned properly was on termination and onboarding.
Yeah.
Especially, and he mentioned that termination side is more complicated than putting people in the company. So they help with that.
Yep.
And managing people, they also have their own systems like a CRM that people can purchase this business as a la carte, as it was mentioned in the podcast,
Yeah.
or they can avail the service as a whole, where it includes the technology and the documentary systems. Wait, let me just. So yeah, so it's basically an onboarding automation platform, as they say, and specified for business experience, HR experience. Yeah, so this is the ones that I've highlight more: document automation management, HRIS, HR compliance, benefits administration. So basically, the whole on people, the company's people, HR in general,
Yes.
and making it a little bit better
So
and less money,
you're
money and time.
you're spot on. That's exactly right. But let me just add one flavor to it because it's important to understand contextually why even Gary like does this, like why he invests in LinkedIn so much. So there's a lot of companies that do that, right? That's not
Yeah.
revolutionary, helping people with all those different things. A lot of the companies that do that, though, are really going after small businesses. So let's say small business like under 50 people right? So you're managing like 50 people, and then it's self-service, like cloud-based tools, like you pay like a monthly subscription and you get access to all this stuff. Makes sense. I'll show you an example, like a competitor. Is it called Ripple? No, let's see. Let's just do like HR or document automation and HRIS software. Bamboo. That's the one. So at first glance, this is obviously like a competitor as well, right? They do hiring and onboarding, payroll, employee experience. This honestly might do more than what Gary does, but this company is a comprehensive system that works for a lot of businesses, but not all businesses. Specifically, not legacy businesses that aren't on the cloud yet. Because if you already have, let's say you've been in business for like 30 years and you have 700 employees. What are you going to, you can't use a system like this because it's not you got to work within the confines of the system. Like, you're not going to get they're not going to build a system around you. They're going to say, look, we have a lot of integrations, like figure it out. We'll give you like an account manager. And so for a lot of businesses that are building today, that are small, that are getting started, these are fine. Gary's really trying to be a helpful hand for companies that can't really use this stuff, because they would say, look, we've been doing it this way for 30 years. We have so many old antiquated systems that are like put together and we don't even have a technical person that knows how to do this. We're just going to continue doing what we're doing because it's always worked. That's what Gary is looking for. And so the sales pitch to them is Instinctive is built specifically to live on top of your current systems. We're not taking your systems and saying, hey, just use Bamboo. Put all your data in here, and then we'll redo everything. A lot of business would be like hesitant to start messing with what they're doing. What they're looking for is a very specific, we want to do exactly what we're doing. We just don't really want to, it's just a mess. That's what Gary's trying to solve, that gap. So what Instinctive is essentially doing is, like you said, a la carte. He calls it configurable modules. So one module is document automation, another module is benefits administration, and then another module is like HRIS. So depending on what you need, Gary could take one module and help you start automating some stuff. So we could start forming a relationship to say, hey, like, I'll give you a use case where, what does that mean from like in a real world use case? And this is why also I say that it's kind of like a needle in a haystack a little bit, because there are businesses that fit this criteria, but like you got to really find the right person. So Gary's working with a business that employs a lot of like moving trucks, like movers. So a lot of individual contributors across, let's say, like a large state or multiple states have like independent operations, but then they work with like one major company that, syncs up resources, let's say. So that major company has to keep track of all their drivers, specifically like licenses. Right? So they need a centralized place. So how have they done that in the past? Well, that's a good example of like the way things worked before cloud. It was like, well, I don't know, the driver would just send it through the mail. Or like if they updated a license, they need to tell the administrative office and like, send a picture of it. So you could see that that's not like an automated situation. That's very difficult for the main person to know what to do to automate that documentation. So incentive,
Yeah.
what it can do is to say, Gary comes in and says, I can fix that for you. We could build and put incentive on top of your system and then make it so all of the drivers now have portals that they could sign in and upload documents. And then I could work with you to say, what do you want to do with, where do you want to put it? How do you want it to like get notifications and sign offs? So I'll help you automate that using incentive at like a very cost effective rate where I'm going to meet you where you're at and we're going to do exactly what you want and not saying like Bamboo, well, yeah, you could do this, but like, you got to change everything you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So basically, it's not the target of this is not to change what you said, change everything what you're doing. They're not offering like the one offer, but rather like fitting it based on the criteria
Yeah.
and helping automate what they have.
Also, Gary's whole incentive platform is built with configurability in mind. So the chances of what he says that anybody would say, can you do this but not this or not this? Chances are these platforms, Bamboo is trying to manage at scale for everybody. So you can't like change the platform. Gary's is different where he's still building it with people. So he's a development team. It's not only just a matter of use our system, is that we're going to work with you to have like a white glove data management service. So we'll build together. I have my development team. We have our systems. We're going to meet you where we're at. We'll go slow. And then Gary's charging them based off of like per user. So it's like a much more cost effective partnership that allows people to kind of have more confidence in growing with incentive than trying to use an off the shelf platform that might at first glance have all the features that incentive has. Like, but if you look at all these companies that use it, they're all like new companies that are all already in the cloud. So like they're starting their HR processes and documentation and benefits stuff today, which makes it a lot easier. And Gary's trying to go after the older companies that like don't really know what to do with. They know it's available, but like they've been doing it one way for so long that they need more hand holding.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? It is
Yes.
complicated, but the reason that I developed my software, just because we're kind of getting towards that part of it, is I can sense that Gary struggles. I've gotten him on so many meetings through the years with my
Mhm.
team. It doesn't really turn into business. Now, Gary's okay with that because he's specifically going very slow. He gets one client, they build some stuff, and then he can re-leverage it for another client. So he has like a lot of patience. And part of the reason why he wants me to build him up as like an influencer on LinkedIn, talking about this stuff, a thought leader. That's why that's why I keep doing this, because it's like he has like a long goal in mind of like a brand of people. If we keep talking about it, people would say, okay, we're finally ready to not be analog, like paper and pen. What can you do? Right? That's what he's hoping for. Um, the reason I designed my softwares that I showed you last time with Gary in mind is because I want to be able to build up all of like these HR business leaders in a group for Gary that will allow him in this funnel we spoke about. Last time we spoke about like how openers and closers, right? We're opening conversations, we're opening up opportunities, and then we're helping organize it so Gary could kind of close the deals. He's not really
Yeah.
closing a deal, which he understands why, and the system has to kind of progress, and also the market has to catch up. Where his idea has always been, eventually these businesses have to go to the cloud. They have no choice. Like especially like with COVID, now they're really seeing that like they need to build systems and figure this out. And he wants to position incentive as that helping hand. What I'm hoping for is I can get all these like HR business leaders, decision makers into software. I can lead by giving them a tool to make their LinkedIn account better, and then Gary gets the goodwill of introducing them to me in a
Mhm.
software way, that maybe they start thinking more highly of Gary from like a technical point of view. So if Gary and I are partners, let's say, even though we're not in this, they might be like, oh, well, like if this person built software, Gary must be very good at software. Let's see what Instinctive does. That's what I'm hoping happens out of this. But regardless, to go back to kind of this, what I want to judge success on is how are we doing by the analytics on
Yeah.
Gary's profile, and then also the analytics on the company page. So we're kind of managing both things. And so LinkedIn really like I said, like the numbers, they speak to you, let's say, but like your actions throughout a week, you could kind of start seeing and playing with the metrics on LinkedIn of like how we're doing. Like, well, we got 4 custom button clicks. What can we do to get that to 10? That is clicking to the website. So, an example of how we could influence that is if we're in a message, maybe just remembering to tell people to follow the company page, check the website. You know what I mean? Like maybe writing that in the caption on a company page post, seeing if it gets any actions. How do we get more search appearances? I right now am more focused on the metrics on Gary than the company page, but I do think it kind of goes hand in hand from like a strategic standpoint. How do we get both elevated? But where I would start for you, because we're kind of starting at the beginning, is how do we get more better analytics here? How do we get that number up to 1,000? Right?
Okay.
Like you have the ability to influence that by commenting, replying, connecting, reaching out. Like if you take those actions, since I'm currently not taking those actions and I already have it at 698, you taking those actions with me writing the content theoretically should make it go up. You could influence that.
By working, because you've spent a lot of time in LinkedIn, how would you say the timeline of doing that number?
I wouldn't think in terms of timelines.
Mm-hmm. You just have, because of course I want to show you that I'm doing it, but also I don't want to pressure myself because
Yeah,
it's
that's
a
what I'm saying.
number.
I wouldn't put pressure on you because you're putting a constraint on you that doesn't really matter, right? Because you're still
Mhm.
learning and you're still like I'm telling you, like it's. Do you have any experience with coding anything, or do you know anybody that codes anything?
No, not yet.
Okay, that's fine. Neither do I. I
But I
don't. I
have,
don't. I don't know how to code anything, but I've worked with developers. You
yeah,
can't create anything like inputs equal outputs. That's
yeah.
just the formula for the world. The formula for you doing anything. You have to take inputs to create outputs. But you'll learn that different inputs create different outputs. So I wouldn't focus on the constraint. I would focus more on this, which is just caring about each interaction. That's kind of what I always like to say. This is, to me, the biggest misunderstanding about LinkedIn. If you do
Mhm.
follow people on that talk about LinkedIn, you'll see this. I actually aspire for my life as I can get out of this and focus more on Colin. This is the message that I want to drill home to people because I've watched the whole LinkedIn infrastructure be built up over like 7 years of me doing this and then like watching other people do it. People have the wrong impression. They focus so much on automation and a little bit like timelines, like what you said. Well, how many results can I get in 30 days? That's like,
Yeah.
right? Or like, and it's like, I don't know. That to me is like the wrong way to think about this, because you're
Mhm.
setting yourself up for failure when you say, well, what if you got good results? First of all, everything builds on top of one another. So it's the 30 days is insignificant. If you want to say maybe 90 days, that's a better, I think, timeline to think under, because you have iterative cycles. Like you're building in not just like the result within 30 days, but like the act of getting better. So it's like, looking at what you've done for a couple weeks and then assessing your plan of actions and then changing the inputs to be able to try to um, do better. Uh, and then also automation that comes with this mindset that you're trying to do something without doing a lot of work. And I just feel like in life, that's the wrong approach.
Especially
I would say, especially LinkedIn, but I actually believe that it's really like I'm 37 years old. I've never seen anything. I've never met anybody or seen anything in life where anybody was like, oh, I got results and it was super easy. Like I
that's
didn't
true.
I've never heard that. So it's like the wrong message to preach to people to think that there's a shortcut. There's no shortcut. That's why my clients like me, because I care about each interaction. Like they subscribe to my methodology, especially Gary, of like not wanting to spam people. He doesn't want to spam people. He wants to build himself up. And that's why I've been able to do this for years, because he understands that I am opposed to automation. Yes, we could spray, and I could say you, Alyssa, go to town. I need 30 every single day. And you will do that, but
There's some quality.
it might be bad quality. You might be reaching out to the wrong people. You might even hit 1,000 profile views. But if 300 of those people aren't literally good, what's the difference? Like, what are we doing? You understand? Like, if Gary starts looking at I'm getting so many views from people who aren't even in my industry, like, what are we focused on here? So, what I like to say is we want to care about each interaction. We want to spread positivity. We want to build other people up. Not just Gary, but we want to use Gary to build other people up. We want to find the people who are trying to be thought leaders. We want to connect with them. We want to follow them. And then by doing that, the numbers will go up anyway. Um,
Yeah.
the other reason that I don't want to put a time frame on it is because we're working together. I hope that I write something that gets a disproportionate post impression that it's possible. That's what I'm trying to write something that maybe that post gets 1,000 views, 1,200 views, 1,500 views, and then out of that, 200 new profile views. I've never done that before. I'm trying to get better at writing because I've never been able to crack that code, but I feel like I'm getting closer. So my point is, it's a joint effort, right? Good content
Yes.
coupled with consistent
Interaction.
action, coupled with following other people, coupled with doing that every day, means that the numbers will take care of themselves. But we should be looking at the numbers not every day, but like every week, to have conversations about like how do we influence that more. That's the idea. We want to make sure that we are consistently getting better at our craft. That's the way I always see it. And the way to do that is to honestly care. This is the thing about marketing, that people are always looking for a quick fix. How do I
Yeah.
automate? How do I pay you to not do anything? How do I not be involved? All,
Yeah.
all of the
A lot
smart,
of
good,
that.
like successful people take a different approach. And it's more about how do I surround myself with the best people who care the most about promoting my business. And I don't care whether or not that's easy or hard. It's about team culture and like having the right mindset on how we're going about doing it, and iterate and care about the numbers at the same time. So, anyways, that's kind of my focus point. Let's just kind of quickly look at Michael's numbers just so we kind of have a frame of reference as we're getting started about like what the numbers really are. And I actually believe that you'll be really easy to at least influence that profile views. And the profile views gives you more ammo to then potentially connect with more people who are already connecting with you and opening conversations with those people who have already looked at it, which means that it's a higher conversion rate. We could also potentially, out of those people, try to connect, send them a company page, like a subscribe to our company page, right? So like we could get more views on our company page by seeing that they view our profile. Those are things that like that's like advanced LinkedIn, right? Like we're using the fact we're using content or something where somebody saw us to connect with that person, then send them a company page follow. So we influence the analytics there and we get a new follower. And then LinkedIn over time will start seeing that they'll be more willing to show our content to more people because they see our numbers going up.
Would you say that there's a lot of difference in Michael's number and Gary?
To be honest,
As
I'm probably not. To be honest, I don't really know. I'm assuming that it's probably not that high. The last 60 days ish, just between me and you, I kind of like I told you I got rid of my team. So basically,
yeah.
The software is getting to a place where we're in the new year where I'm ready to start distributing out for Michael and Gary. That's how I designed it with them in mind. My team was, I think, getting a little. They just don't really want to do this anymore, and it's fine. And also, I just feel like I'm better at it than them. So it's not saying that they're bad. It's just that like, it wasn't quite working. So for the last like end of November, December. And also, those were like the holiday time, so LinkedIn isn't very like active. Like right now is the most active time I think of the year because everybody is starting fresh, going through the winter and fall to try to get business, to build networks. Like that we weren't really reaching out a lot proactively. I was focused more on how do I write better copy just so I could take this over and hopefully make it easy for myself and whoever was helping me to just build them up, both of them as thought leaders using copywriting specifically. That's what I was doing. Let's look at the numbers though to compare. But I'm going to guess that they're probably the same. I actually am going to guess that Gary's a little higher than Michael. The reason being that I feel like Gary's target market is a little bit more active on LinkedIn. Because think about it, they're like HR.
Yes, yes.
So like, I feel like it's a little easier to get engagement and stuff through even though Gary's business is more complicated, the target market is kind of easy to talk to. And Michael's, we're talking athletes, trainers, a little bit people who are not as, they're a little bit more like about themselves. You know, where if you do outreach to them, they will say thank you, but they're not necessarily going to run to like comment and reply like a HR person understandably would. But that's also why, and also for Michael's, we've been focused so heavily on that media, like bloggers, like trying to get Michael's into the idea, and I am too. Like for Michael, the goal is to really promote physiologic job position. We have to like educate the public on that concept because people don't really know about it. And so the easiest way to do that is to get on a podcast or like a media so people can ask questions to Michael and then like broadcast that to his network. So because of that, we've been a lot in the DMs really trying to nurture relationships with those people. Versus Gary's just trying to like talk to whoever is willing to talk to him.
Sorry, can I quickly grab something?
Yeah, of course.
All right, thank you.
No problem. This is taking a long time to load. Let's see. It might be my computer. Anyways, you asked another question of where can we see all the hashtags? Let me show you that. If you go in LinkedIn to my network, you'll see here that on the left-hand side, here are other places that you can use to follow and create engagement. So you have obviously your connections that you could always pull from Sales Navigator or look through here. But this is why Sales Navigator is good, because the idea of you going through 5,000 is just not really possible by clicking versus using Sales Navigator and saying, hey, I want to search by all first degree connections that are active on LinkedIn with these keywords. It just makes it a lot easier. You could look for followers, and then you could also, follow hashtags. So I don't know if you ever played with this, but let's say you went to hashtag and then sports safety. You have ways to be able to search for stuff. Let's see, people who talk about sports safety. You could find people to follow based off hashtags, so you could follow them. Let's do sports. Actually, I haven't looked at this in a while. I think it's changed. Anyways, where you could use the search to find people that talk about specific topics. So this is another way that you could prospect. And then here, mentioning from members, past, filtered by. I have some in these accounts already set up. I would start there where this is not loading, but if you go to my network and Gary, we have done this in the past where if you go to hashtags, all this is basically doing is we're following these. So this is think of it like a portal to be able to potentially do organic engagement, because if you could start here, but you could follow more. But again, it's talking about actions. The goal is to be able to be in and out in a sense, right? Because at a certain point, you're going to have diminished returns, and I don't want you to burn out. Technically, yes, you could spend 5-6 hours a day doing this because it's a never-ending supply of prospects. But that's not beneficial. At a certain point, it becomes too much, especially in one day. That's why I like to really start this 10 hours, and it's okay, we'll do an hour a day for Michael, do an hour a day for Gary, and see where you're at. And then if you're doing well and you like it, it makes it a lot easier to say, okay, what if I doubled your hours? And if you wanted to spend 20 hours a week, and let's say you did, a couple hours a day for them, we could go slowly, right? 15, going from 10 to 15 is a big step, right? Because if you're starting to really think about how to spend over an hour a day in the account being productive, it allows you to start thinking through what actions can I do to influence the results, and it doesn't feel like I don't know what to do, which I understand now. It's I don't know what to do, and you're question whether or not you're getting results. Anyways, this is a portal, right? So I have HR tech, 35 million people. If you do follow search for hashtags, sometimes this comes up. I don't really remember. We got to maybe find it on Google where you could follow hashtags. The whole thing about this is it's literally just another way to find people, because think about it. What I said before is the green flags are people who are active on LinkedIn. Well, anyone that's already talking about HR stuff, might allow you to find more good prospects. To be honest, I found that Sales Navigator is still better than this.
Mhm.
But this does give you an opportunity to potentially find people to comment on. The problem with this is because you're following the hashtag of it, you'll see that some of these people aren't first degree. So, you're commenting on people who you haven't followed with, which I'm not saying is bad, but I want you to understand that that's a different social dynamic because these people don't know you versus the news feed, which is mostly first degree. Sometimes they do put in like some second degree here, but it's usually for reason, right? Because this is algorithmic. So you can kind of tell
Mhm.
like this person's second degree, okay, he posted this, this is here. And there's only, let's see how many comments there are. Okay, so there's like all these comments that we could jump into. We could reply to one, we could start our own. This is the type of stuff that I would say that you should probably start working with me on to try to get good at. Thinking
Okay.
about what do we say to just, again, insert positivity. The way I like to think about comments is we're always like trying to leave comments for other people to maybe reply to us. So it's like if you find like a thought leader in HR that talks about maybe like five things, five things to do in HR, great. This is great. Have you thought about this? Maybe we add a six. What are your thoughts on that? Asking a question, seeing if we get engagement. Those are the type of things that if we did 10 of those, a lot of people would start, like I'm seeing these people's names, I can start clicking on them. They might go to their profile. And then boom, we get more profile views. It makes it easier to say, hey, I saw we engaged in the comments. I wanted to send you a quick connect. Hope you
Mhm.
respond. So we can influence our network, engagement, things like that.
So for this one's on the feed, and then you go into the comments, and then you see, do you prioritize the people that are first degree, or you still can engage with the people that are third degree on the comments on the people on your news feeds?
You can
News
respond
feed.
to anybody that's in your newsfeed. And I don't know exactly how the algorithm works where it's showing you. Um, like, it clearly is based off of who they think you would like because they want to have you, they only want to show things that they think people will enjoy, which is again part of the reason why I want to get up the profile views and those analytics because they're clearly using those numbers to determine how likely it is that like my post is getting in the newsfeed. So like for example, you see here he's a lot lower than Gary. I kind of thought that. Um, so 98 profile views, 70 search appearances, 131 post impressions. So he's not doing as well as Gary. I got a lot more in post impressions, but that's what I'm saying. I can kind of notice that Gary's getting more comments on his post because of like these HR people. Also, like think about it this way. I don't know if you've read any of the posts I'm writing, but like I'm always adding like a PS to try to get
Mhm.
engagement. The PS on Gary is always about like trying something to do with like spreading information about HR, which if people respond to that, and I think people will, I think I'll be able to make him an influencer because it is helpful for everybody else. If everyone's sharing their information, then that becomes helpful as a resource. That's what I'm trying to go for. For Michael, not everyone trains separately, so like what helps with one person is not necessarily as helpful to somebody else. That I feel like I got to start thinking through how to get more impressions on it and how to provide more value. So I would say
Sorry.
yeah, go on.
Um, what I personally, what my impression with Michael is that the business is very straightforward, and in a way that it's straightforward, it limits the things that you can do with a account. It's not as wide as Gary's account, so maybe we can add more target audience than sports.
Yes, we absolutely can. I also believe that that just means that we have to spread more positivity. That's the way I see it. That's why, like with comments, I actually think that'll work because it's okay if we're talking about the mouth card all the time, but we don't want to only be talking about what we want to talk about. Meaning, we want to try to encourage other people based off what they're talking about.
So basically, somewhat like inserting something about like discipline sports, or like the mindset the people in sport love to think anything about connected to them having disciplined approach or things like that.
yeah, um, yeah. I mean, again, you really don't have to overthink it. Like it's really like finding more people to connect with, right? And then as they are hopefully posting things in the news feed, expressing positivity towards what they're connecting with. Remember that what we're trying to do here when we think about a funnel is control our position. So if you
Yeah.
connect with somebody, if you find somebody, you know, within that first, let's say, 2 weeks, how do we control our position? Meaning we connect with them, send them a nice request, they connect, we start seeing if they're posting, we comment, we be one of the 8 or 10 people that this is great, thanks for sharing, right? It doesn't always have to be so thoughtful. Thanks for sharing, this is
Yeah.
great, have a great day, keep it up. Just this is great, and then we're posting, and maybe they start feeling bad, and they give us a comment because that's what I'm saying. When we go back to this, like the cheat code
Okay.
of people who are individual versus community based, if we find the people who are trying to build community and we're trying to spread positivity, we would hope that it would be somewhat reciprocal. Meaning,
Yeah.
if I'm getting 1 or 2 posts or comments organically, but then you are doing your thing, how do together we get to a post where we get 10 comments? A lot of it's hard work based off of the fact that they feel bad because we've been commenting on them, so they give us a comment. But that's okay. That all helps with the algorithm. Um, that's kind of the nature of it. So
Okay.
so we went over hashtags, and then the last question you have is, do both of the business have a detailed description of their target market? My answer to that is to look in Sales Navigator. We talked a lot about it today. We've created so many
Hey,
lists in Sales Navigator. Yes, what's your question?
I know, sir. I also want to set a separate meeting because I really want to learn more about Sales
That's fine.
Navigator.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to have like a meeting that's specified for this one.
Yep, I totally agree. So that's kind of what I wanted to go over today because it's like we talked today a lot about LinkedIn. That was the goal. You got
Mhm.
to understand LinkedIn. And I hope that you walk away from this conversation of like, okay, I'm starting to see how you could think of LinkedIn maybe like a computer. And I, as the programmer, have with my
Mhm.
words and my actions and my energy, have the ability to program output. The inputs that I
Yeah.
have, the positivity I spread, the encouragement I give, the likes I share, the connections I make, the prospecting I do, have the ability to create reciprocal energy that would allow this number of notifications to go up. You have that ability. And LinkedIn gives you that ability, but you got to understand where to spend your time and how to do it somewhat quickly, so you're not drowned by I call it like paralysis analysis, where it's like there's so
Yes.
many things to do. What do I do? That's why I'm like, okay, that's fine. I get it. Put a constraint on yourself where you're just going to do it for an hour a day, and then be done with it. So you don't
Mhm.
have that paralysis analysis. Because if I told you to spend 2 hours, 3 hours, that's where it's going to be like, oh God, like I just don't know. I feel overwhelmed, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. That's not the goal. Remember,
Mhm.
when you think about coding and programming, oftentimes the result at the end could look great, even if the code is really shitty. That's just the reality. We could always clean up the code and make it better to go smoother and faster, and that's the intended desire where I'm trying to get you to, where like you kind of are able to create templates where it's like, oh, I've seen this before. I know what to say. That I think would get results. That's usually what happens. There's only so many situations of people kind of posting things or ways to connect with people, ways to introduce yourself, ways to send somebody a company page request. There's only so many things to do. There are constraints that allow you to have more confidence in knowing what to say and just do it, so you can get more notifications and influence the numbers.
Mhm.
And then the messaging and positioning is really understanding Michael and Gary, which I feel like you kind of do at this point. And then also remembering that this is all about controlling your position, because the actions that we take, if we have good profiles and we understand what the intended desire is and where we're at in the funnel, it makes it a lot easier to kind of then know what to say based off of like where you're at. What do you say in a connection request? What do you say when you endorse somebody? Or like if somebody endorsed you and you want to open a conversation, what would you say? To be honest, it's really not rocket science. It's like, I feel like I don't want you to think that like I'm going to tell you, oh, say this and like it's going to be magical. It's really a matter of understanding context. It's like, well, if you're endorsing somebody, see how they react. And then why did you endorse them? Don't be creepy. Well, I endorsed them because they were just talking about this and it seemed like they knew what they were talking about. Great. Like, endorse them. And then if they don't respond, like, you could choose to open a conversation a few days later and just let them know, hey, I endorse you. I love what you're doing. Keep it up. Like,
Mhm.
it's not rocket science, but you'll probably get a response from that. Thanks so much. I like what you're doing as well. Boom. Great. Okay. Hey, why don't we follow up with this person like 4 days later after they respond again? I loved your latest post. Um, you know, what are you working on these days? Boom. Now you're engaged in like kind of a serious conversation at that point, which you kind
Yeah.
of initiated, found, started, and it's like, okay, great. For Michael, I would love to. Yeah, that sounds great. I would love to, give you a discount. Here's a coupon code. You should try out the Power Plus mouth guard. See if that works. Right now, we can influence sales. For Gary, oh, I love what you're doing. I would love to share more about what Instinctive does. Would you be up for just like a quick 20-minute call? Like we could say that at the right time. And if we've been really nice, that's how you reel people in. At that point, it's harder for them to say no. And if they are, again, community focused versus individual focused, they're probably willing to get on a 15-minute call. Like they should
Yeah.
be. Because every time you meet with these people, you always want to put face to names. It's like the natural extension of any interaction. If you've kind of been interacting for a couple weeks and then you find the right time to just say that you want like a networking call, which is basically what I do, then we go through a booking process with like Calendly links to just drop it on Michael's or Gary's calendar. And that's what I want you to help me with, because it becomes a data management challenge of like
Yeah.
keeping up with people, finding the good people, nurturing the relationships, prepping Gary or Michael to remember to read the DMs so they show up somewhat prepared of like how this came about.
Came through.
Yeah, but like they're because we're talking as them. I found that doesn't really like. First of all, people know that people have assistants, so it's not like it's crazy.
Yeah.
And like they're sharing their story, so it's not like I'm talking about. It might get a little bit more complicated if I'm talking about my software in his DM, right? Because now all of a sudden but I don't do that. Like that's the whole point of getting them into my software. So I have a DM with them that I could just be set. Hey, I want to introduce myself. I know that you know Michael, or I know that you know Gary, and they introduced you to me. Let's talk about something separately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I actually have, yeah, I think it's very clear to me now, and I really appreciate that. It's of course there's still like a part of me that's still scared or not confident to dive in immediately and comment and interact. with people, but now I get more of like a bigger grasp than the first time that we've talked about it, and that's true. I feel like I understand it more on a um on deeper level. So I think what's next would be more the familiarization on LinkedIn application, the actions itself, and Sales Navigator. I also want to now saw your thought process and how you look at the account, look at the people. That's something that's really helpful to me, especially what you've mentioned, the red flags and green flags. Those are something that I really took note of. But of course, I have to look at it, go back to all this meeting,
Mm-hmm.
take note of, and process.
Um, totally makes sense. Just let me scan through. Let's look at Michael's, and I would just gonna show you how I would think about um, uh, responding. So one, Marcus, I know is somebody that he is involved with, like
Mhm.
business wise or sorts. Like you'll see Marcus all the time because he comes up. He's very active. He's reshared things that Michael has done. So like that's a great person to comment on.
Mhm.
Especially considering that you see he's a community builder. You could tell, right? This guy's like trying to build community. So it's easy. This person, interesting tidbit about concussions. Not a lot of comments. We could definitely at least like it, right? So at least we're kind of being seen. Comments better, but liking is good. But recognizing that this one doesn't have any comments, so we would be the first ones. So there's an opportunity for us to maybe ask him a question. We could open up a dialogue, or we could just say, "This is really great stuff. Thanks for sharing." Remember, if anybody then in his newsfeed sees it, there's a higher probability that he would see Michael's face. So we might want to, you know, do that. I'm not going to do that right now, just because I would stay away from politics.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with.
General red flag.
Yeah. Well, it's like this is again like where I want to focus on myself because I'm not saying that that's a red flag. That might actually be a useful thing to get
Yeah.
interactions, but it's a red flag for doing it as a service. Because, like I said, I
Yes.
have a rule of thumb that it's always positive, and it's only if I think that there's a direct path toward getting a serious conversation. Other than that, I don't want to cause any. I don't want to cause any problem. So, okay, Wednesday wisdom, the first most important subject to study. Okay, so look, the fact that this guy is doing Wednesday Wisdom shows that he's community centric. He's literally trying to engage. So this is an easy person to be able to butter up and think through how to be responsive. At least give him a like, right? So now at least recognize that any person who's doing something like this is definitely going to look at who those 13 people are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who
Yes.
like this, right? And then this person, great post, and I would love to add what you do and what do you love, right? So this is a good example of this person doing what I would say is a good comment, right? Because it demonstrates that he's watched it, listened to what he said, and he's adding to it. And now he's opening it up where we could even reply to Patrick and say, I agree that those two things would be great. I'm also going to add this, right? So now all of
Mhm.
a sudden we might have the ability for this guy Lee or Patrick to respond to us. And maybe we get 2 or 3 profile views out of that action because Patrick, who we're second degree connections with, might go, who's this guy? So he goes to look at our profile. We see that. And now he's accessibility.net, Fisher domain. I don't really know if there's any business
Connection.
interaction with him, so we can decide whether or not to connect with him or not. But, there's nothing wrong with connecting with people if he's positive, right? Because it influences our numbers. So it doesn't really, why not? Get another connection, right? Like, we want to be somewhat, have a threshold, but, it doesn't, it's we want to get the numbers up of like how many connections there are. So I'm not saying that that's bad. LinkedIn.
Oh,
Who?
I
Yeah.
sorry, I sorry to cut off. Just want to say that I have to run in about five
Yeah, that's
minutes.
fine. Yep. No,
Mhm.
no problem. This person is.
I think this is a community based.
Yeah, but the problem is that she's a little too talking about herself. So I would say that there are segments of community based where are you actually building a community or are you trying to use LinkedIn to build your own community?
Okay.
You see the
Okay.
difference? So she's literally
Mhm.
promoting herself. So she could use my help on how to use LinkedIn to actually get the results that she wants because what she's doing is pitching in the comment or sorry in her post, which isn't really providing any value or creating too much conversations in this person probably knows her. There's some
Mhm.
good ones on here. Um, but she does have 55 comments. So like I'm not even trying to judge, but I'm saying that like that's kind of where we could look at the comments. We could respond. Those might be good opportunities. This is where the time needs to be spent. This looks political.
Yeah, no, I understand the prospecting part.
Yeah, like this is the job. Like this part takes time. You have to be thoughtful. You got to go through, but within like an hour, you can usually get through a lot of it. And then as you do it day over day, um, it starts becoming a little repetitive. And to be honest, you'll start seeing that a lot of the people that LinkedIn is giving to you is a lot of the same people, which is why you want to start expanding out, either using Sales Navigator, using hashtags, finding other areas in which to find more people. So if you do both of those things while I produce content and post it, hopefully the numbers start increasing significantly.
Okay.
Beautiful. All right. Well, that's what I got for today. Um, Take a stab, I would say, at um, this on your own. What I would say to kind of start this process, we should meet again to talk about Sales Navigator, but I would like for you to start getting into the account and then use Slack with me to, if you want to give me like a proposal, just to kind of start it off of like, hey, I saw this opportunity. Here's what I would say. I could
Mm.
just approve it and you could start posting. And we could start slow a little bit and maybe
Uh,
build out some templates together of like kind of some pre-approved sentiments and copy. But again, like as long as you have the right sentiment, I'm not going to be so concerned on the words. You're an English speaker, so like it's not. I don't. It doesn't really seem like there's going to be like grammar problems. Like past tense. That's what I've run into in the past, where like they're using the wrong tense. That looks like it's a foreigner. As long as it's kind of positive, then we should be good to go. And yeah, inputs create outputs. So we got to create the inputs. It's not just a matter of theory. We got to get into the actions.
okay. I've learned a lot of insights from today, and hopefully by this week we can talk about Sales Navigator.
Yeah, I'm around whenever you're available. Spend a little bit of time doing this. Um,
Mhm.
and then, yeah, let me know when you want to jump on another call and we can talk about Sales Navigator. Sales Navigator is it's the secret sauce. Like everything we went
Okay.
over of free LinkedIn, you'll see, but Sales Navigator just makes it like so easy to have confidence in your ability to go after who you want and find people. Like you're kind of at the whim of who's posting and like what's happening, and Sales Navigator like puts the tools in your hands and you could do that on your own time. So that's the work that you really can do at any time to prep for looking at people. And then this commenting and reply stuff, connecting. I If you don't do that during this block of like 9 a.m. to like 2 p.m. EST, the conversion rates kind of go down because people are like active
Okay.
now and then they like will look at it the next day and you might miss the algorithm. That was one of your questions. Does it matter on the algorithm to respond fast? Yes and no, not really. But like the chances of you getting a double comment go down. That's the way I would think about it, right? Like if you responded
Okay.
to that guy Patrick tomorrow, he probably won't respond back. But if you did it somewhat
Yeah.
fast, he might actually respond back. And then you get 2 comments. That helps the algorithm if they see that there's a conversation on this post.
Okay. I'll look.
Okay.
So what time? What's the time window again? Can you please repeat on that?
I would say between like really 8 a.m. EST to like 1 p.m., 2 p.m., right? It's like that morning block of procrastination that most people have. And then after lunch, 2, 3, I'm not saying that it doesn't work. Like 3 p.m.'s okay. But like, people love to procrastinate in the morning. And then also sometimes you'll find that like if you respond at like 11 a.m. EST, at like 1, they respond. So it's like they took a couple hours, but they got back to you. But like once you start responding at like 3 or 4, you're probably not going to get a response the rest of the day.
Mhm.
Again, this is the type of stuff that you kind of start getting a sense of what's working by just doing. I'm not,
Mhm.
and kind of just build it into your own routine.
Okay. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think I'll connect in Slack.
Perfect.
Yep.
It was nice chatting with you, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.